it, while people who want to join us do join us. But if you're here now, thank you very much for being here, all our listeners and our viewers. This is Rooted Voices, Sacred Bones. This is a wonderful, special little podcast today because we have our very first guest. Now, I'm joined by Joanne, who is, of course, one of my hosts, but our special guest is Hela Wozniak-Kay, and I hope I said your name right, Hela. Hela is someone you all need to know, and you will want to know, and chances are good you're going to enjoy every single minute of this because she brings such a bright energy to everything she does. All of her details will be in the show notes, whether you're on the podcast or watching us on YouTube, so please be sure to connect with Hela. She, of course, has Sister Snog as her business, and that's in itself quite an interesting name for a business. We're not going to get into business here, though. You can go explore all of that at your leisure. For now, we're going to explore Hela. So very much welcome to our wonderful little podcast, Hela.
Well, thank you very much. And I feel incredibly privileged and honoured to be the inaugural podcast guest. I mean, that is just really very exciting. And so thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. And I've done my hair specially.
I know you've been boofed. I know. Yes. She bought a special, very, very large round brush so she can be boofed. So she's been boofed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think you might want to ship one to Joanne. Joanne can then be boofed.
I might do that, yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
Yes. Once you've gone there, you'll never go back, honestly.
See?
Yeah.
Boofing is something really special. Yes.
Yeah.
And what we're going to be talking about today are several little topics because Hela is quite multidimensional, like all of us are, and she has a lot of strings to her bow. I always get that backwards, bows to strings, strings to bow. I don't know. I hope I got it right. Strings to bow? Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
And really, we want to start, though. I'm going to start a bit backwards. We're going to start with identity because I think a lot of people are exploring identity. I think there's a lot of people transitioning right now from either a corporate career into a private career or retiring or having kids or empty nesters. There's a lot of movement going on right now, and there's a lot of people now kind of exploring identity, especially since the population is getting older.
Yeah.
You know, when you get older, you kind of reflect quite a bit about who you really are. You don't have time for it when you're young for the most part. You're too involved in stuff. But as you get older, you definitely do explore more about who you are. So, Hela, you've been doing a bit of that. Joanne, you've been doing a bit of that. And I'd like to hear your take on that. I'm going to start with Joanne, though, Hela.
Yes, fine. Great.
Okay. Wow, you brought up a topic that I think the word has been used about 15 times in a little online group that I belong to, that we do little short videos to talk to each other and support each other, and it's a woo-woo based group. And it's amazing that the continuous thing about identities and people in what I would say, most of them are younger than me, so they're not changing business identities, which is something that I'm doing, but they're changing their identities in relationship to their family members, and they're finding themselves able to set more boundaries, and they're thinking of themselves in a different roles and in different ways with their families that are actually better for them, less stressful for them in the long run, less trauma and drama. In my case, not that much trauma and drama anymore. The kids are out of the house. But I am changing the way I think about myself as an intuitive mentor, and the the kind of program that I want to have to help people find their own creative core, their own spiritual anchor, and that feeds into the identity thing too. But that's how I'm changing, and I finally decided to call myself a destiny navigator after spending a bunch of time calling myself an intuitive mentor or a spiritual guide. And so that kind of identity is shifting for me.
Mm-hmm. But there's also more to it than that, because
Okay.
even if you change what you call yourself, you're
No,
still changing your identity underneath all of that.
Oh,
You
yeah.
kind of have to in order to support that shift.
Exactly.
And I also know that Hela wears like 9 or 10 or 12 or 15 or 25 or whatever different hats. So I know Hela steps up depending upon the circumstance to embrace the identity she needs when she needs to use it. Is that about right, Hela?
100% correct.
Right. So tell me more about what you feel about identity and the way things are transitioning for you.
Yeah, I think it's I think through life sometimes we get a little bit lost if we're treading the same path on the same street with the same people, and it's another year and it's another this, and I think I got into that the same because I didn't really appreciate. I mean, I lived in Greenwich for 20 years, but there was a bit of change there because there was a young person, growing up. So you kind of, everything's a little bit different. In Hove, it started to have, I like rhythm. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah. I love rhythm. I don't like routine. Rhythm is good because it's the rhythm of life, it's a powerful thing and all that business. And when I was growing up, I was always one for adventure, whatever that might be. And I was never in a hurry. I wasn't in a hurry to go to university. So I took a year off and then I went traveling, not sort of like massively global, because at those days, it was a bit of interrail and it was, doing X, Y, and Z. And then I always had that spirit, but then I kind of stopped traveling physically and mentally. And then when, my daughter went to London, and it's not like I don't ring her every day. In fact, I don't think I've rung her for about 5 weeks. I've created myself in that we're quite sort of laissez-faire of each other, but when we're on the phone, we're there forever. And she's, always wanted to be an actor, and that's what she's doing, holding down 3 jobs. But what happened to me is there seemed to be too much of the same ebb and flow. So when I had the opportunity, someone said, would you move to Scotland? And I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I didn't really know what it was. And within 6 weeks, we'd packed up and here we were. And it was the beginning when I hit my 60s and I thought of it as my teenage renaissance. Not that I'm wanting just to be, Mrs. Party Animal, because it's a different sort of teenage renaissance. And within that, I've always liked certain things. I love flower arranging. I could have been a florist. I've never trained or anything. I've done flowers for weddings, for funerals. And every week I always do something beautiful. And because I've got this amazing garden on my doorstep, and the other day I learned this phrase, even though I knew it, called positive procrastination, which is while you're thinking about whatever it might be, your next challenge or this, but if you're doing something, before you know where you are, on Sunday, I did a beautiful bouquet, and then I went blackberry picking with the dog, and there's rhubarb in the garden, and I'd made a rhubarb and blackberry cobbler. And I don't think I've made a cobbler for years because I'm a curious cook. And then I also, I love writing.
Wonderful.
So I'm, writing in the business world, but in the personal world, and obviously I'm an iPhone snapper. I've got more. I could actually open up just via my phone. If you need a picture of anything, that's legal,
Oh,
I will have it. Probably illegal, something blue, something pink, something orange,
right.
people, shoes, clothes, hats. I love charity shopping, and I've sort of lost that a bit. And I found in Perth there is this emporium. I mean, it's basically Macy's, but a charity shop, because there are rows and rows and rows, and there's nothing better than a row.
Now, Hela, you just mentioned Perth, and people are going to think you're in Australia. Where are you?
Yes, I'm actually in Scotland.
Yes.
Yes, Perth,
Yeah.
Scotland.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so I'm also a lover of. I've always liked history and tradition, and I love dress codes and tartan. OMG! So I went to the Perth Highland Games on Sunday,
Oh my gosh.
Ooh.
and I was like, this is fantastic, because you can do all sorts, and I love the hairy coos. They're known as coos, not cows, because they're like, there's all sorts of things. And for the first time in my life, I saw some beefy Scotch cakes tossing the caber,
Uh-huh.
and one of them actually did it. This is not for the faint-hearted, because I have no idea how they pick it up. One of them was slight. I'm like, he's going to fall over, but no. It's about the core. It's not about the beefcake. And it was fantastic. And then they do all sorts of things like, armor, medieval armor. There's some sort of club where they wear their own kind of groovy armor and get these swords out and then just smash each other with the swords.
Yes. So you would enjoy a Renaissance festival.
I would absolutely love it.
And you'd probably really enjoy a steampunk.
I have got quite a few Hela steampunk lungs. See? Because I've actually, that's very intuitive, because I do have a top hat and I have a bowler hat, and I have worn them on numerous occasions. Sometimes a bit decorated, sometimes but steampunk. There was a time when Theo and I were quite into, that
steampunk.
Yeah. We've got a couple of, even at a few sort of Sister Song events, we would be a little bit, because she used to come sometimes and, help set up the tables, because I'd trained her from the age of 2 on how to wrap and decorate tables. Yep. Well, tablescaping is another thing I love. See? Creating. We never have a meal without a little something on it, on the table.
See, never heard of tablescaping before, have you, Joanne?
Absolutely not. No idea.
It's like creating a landscape on a table, isn't it?
Thank you. It absolutely is. And I only just heard of it last year or recently. I didn't grow up thinking, so in a way, in my alternative world, talking about identity, I would have loved to have done installations in major department stores around the world.
You probably would have been in demand from what I know of you. And the more people find out about you, Hela, the more they look at Sister Snog, the more they look at perhaps what you do on LinkedIn and some of the things you share on Instagram. Even though I'm not out there, I do know you share on Instagram.
Yeah.
And, I know you're on Facebook as well. But the more people find out about you and the more they see what you've created, the more they're going to be wondering about your creativity, because I think part of identity is tied to creativity. We have to create our identities, after all, don't we? Yep. And our identities feed our creativity, but it's not the only thing. So if I asked you, where in the world does all this creative stuff come from with you, Hela? Because you are just, I thought I was prolific, and you are very prolific. But you're prolific in a different way than I am. And I think that's one thing that is really wonderful. It's one thing I really love about our relationship, is that we're prolifically creative in different ways.
Yes.
So tell me about your creativity and where that all stems from.
Well, I am plagued with ideas, which is actually a bit of a curse.
Yes, it is. I agree.
Because, unfortunately, I can't see them all to fruition at the moment. And I sometimes find it difficult to have an idea and see it through to the end. And what's a great irony is when Theo, my daughter, was growing up, she had to say, I must not be distracted, which was total irony from me, because I'm always distracted. But we kind of laugh about it. And I think it's, I believe in magic. I mean, I seriously do. And I believe in other worlds and, kind of reality fantasy. And I love all these, like, that's one of the reasons I think Scotland, the magic is actually real, and I can see it and feel it and experience it. And it links to history and folklore. And I think some of where it comes from is because, even though I wasn't an only child, my brother is 22 years older than me, and I was born to much, much older parents. So, like, my dad was 52 when I was born, and my mum was like late 40s. So she really was a geriatric mum in those days.
Indeed.
And and my brother Paul Love was lumbered with me, so he got out as much as he could, but it was very responsible. And I had to amuse myself, because I was the Polish girl of Mr. and Mrs. Five Lane, a woman who didn't speak English, which was my mum, and a very lovely chap, Polish guy with his little flat cap on. And it took a long time for me to be, if you like, accepted by the kids on the street. So a lot of the time I had created my own worlds for me. And I think I've kind of done that. And I always, I always say I wasn't a people pleaser. I was, because under my bed, as Christmas was coming, I would buy little presents in Shipley Market. Like, I remember getting everybody, all my friends, probably the whole class, a Womble soap. I don't know if you remember Underground Overground wombling free. The wombles. So they had, Bulgaria. And I remember there was something like 20p. So I'd line them up, and then I'd be wrapping them up, and, not to bribe people, but to, give a little gift. Because I think little gifts are better than stupid, big, expensive, So in answer to the question, I think it kind of is that. It is, a lot of it stems from your childhood.
It does, indeed. And I also love the fact that even as a kid, you were creating your own little worlds and keeping, different worlds as you go. I mean, as you grow, your worlds expand, some of them shrink. It's typical of any, I think, phase of your life, isn't it? There are some things that expand and some things that kind of retreat a bit. And sometimes we revisit those things that retreat. That may be some of the stuff that's happening, I think, for a lot of people right now, is revisiting some of the things.
I think you're right.
That once they had done, or they had thought about, or they had dreamed about, or wanted to create. There's so much within that, isn't there? Joanne, what about you? Because you do create as well. I know that your focus, I don't know if it is on creating, but tell me more about what you do with creativity and where that comes from for you.
My creativity is still about words, because I've been in love with words since I was in the second grade, and no teacher needed to talk me into picking up the little books and reading them and learning to read. Spent most of my later childhood reading science fiction stories rather than going out and playing with other people, other kids. But as a creative expression, I find poetry to be the most resonant with who I am. For one thing, I can write a sentence that's at least 4 or 5 lines long. I have a lot of intellectual curiosity, and I've indexed a lot of academic books, and so I can write huge long sentences. And what's nice about poetry, and what I find is part of the creativity of it, is that I can make one or two words create an entire picture of something in someone's mind, or bring up an entire emotion and a memory of an experience
Mm-hmm.
that can resonate with the words that I have put in. So it's a piece of discipline in a very natural way. And at the same time, it allows me to paint pictures with words instead of coming up with complicated thoughts and things like that. And I've also recited them, which I
Mm-hmm.
consider part of the
The
creative
creative.
process. It's it's kind of an acting job, sort of, but it's a performance. And I love performance. Since I took ballet when I was a little kid, I've always loved performance. So it's a perfect combination for me. And most of my poems nowadays, before, when I was going through my midlife crisis, it was about love and, you know, all those things that happen to you when your whole life falls apart and comes back together again. And now it's more about the universe and ourselves, and being at peace with ourselves. It's more woo-woo kind of stuff that I
It's more
approach.
introspective, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good word. I couldn't find it. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's a lot more introspective than it used to be. But I still find it that, to me, it's the perfect way for me to express myself without creating too many words.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
So I have a question. Your
Yes, ma'am.
poetry, are you, or have you thought of publishing it in some shape or form?
She
Yes, I
has.
have. The book is called Lyrical Lives, and it's my
Lyrical Lives.
first. Yes, and it's my first collection of poetry, which I published in
A few years ago.
2017 or 2018. I think it's been a
Something like
while.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's
yeah,
been a while, hasn't it?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I'm working on the second edition. I was going to add a section to it with a different sort of topic, but I haven't got round to it yet.
No, I
Do it.
think that's lovely, because I have the person who got me to Scotland, Lucy. She too has been writing poetry forever and a day,
Ah,
and she puts them on Substack or Facebook or Instagram or wherever.
mm.
And she's actually working with Marie Louise,
Uh-huh.
and she's putting them into a book. And I also came across someone else literally about 2 or 3 weeks ago who is also writing poetry. So I put Lucy in touch with Joe as
Very good.
two kind of poets who are wanting to publish it, because they need to be published for that reason. That, you know, they I think something like poetry, I think books need to be published, but there's just something kind of lyrically magical about
Yes.
people's poems.
Mhm.
I'm very good at limericks.
Ooh, lovely.
Uh-oh.
Those are
But
so
they're
much.
they're not for this show.
No, they're not necessarily for this
Sorry.
show. No, no,
I'll-
no.
Oh,
I'll-
right. They might
yeah.
not work.
Yeah, see, we got to sometimes just kind of rein Hela back
Yes, exactly.
to,
Back to
to
this
where
is
we need to be.
a little bit more
Yeah, yeah.
cultural than my lyrics.
Yes. Well, you know, Joanne knows, Hela, you and I are getting to know each other, but Words, my best friend, and I have done a lot of creativity with
Well, yeah.
clay and with whatever I can put my hands on, basically, as long as my hands will work and I can do stuff with it. But I also love to create with connections, with bringing people together, with
Oh,
conversation, with
okay.
being able to hold an audience, which I can do very well. But I also love creating with my voice, which I love to do too. There's so many ways we can create, and a lot of times we just don't consider what we're doing as creativity until we've kind of look back and say, "Oh, that was different. That was kind of creative," right? I mean, if you look around yourself, everything that you can see around you, you can use in some way, shape, or form in a creative process. And it's lovely when you can see that and see it being put together in a way that makes it different, gives it meaning, gives it a different meaning perhaps than what it was before you started to put it together. And that's what I love about the creative process, is you're bringing life to something that didn't exist before. And speaking of that, we were talking about creativity and identity. But a lot of what we do in our lives, not just with our creativity, but when we do, we have the urge to shift our identity because something isn't settled within us or something needs to shift, because that's usually our cue that we need to look at things a little differently in our lives. And that has to do with intuition. Now, I know our last podcast episode was all about intuition. And I know we didn't actually get into the ways that we can access our intuition. And we're not covering that here. But I would very much like to know more about the way intuition works in your life with creativity and identity, and any other way you'd care to share with us the way intuition works for you, Hela.
I would say when I don't listen, it bites my posterior.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of times when I've known that sometimes you want something really badly, and you think you're going to get it, and you think it's going to be great, but your intuition is saying you've got to walk away from this, but you don't, because you think you want that thing, whatever that thing may be. I don't know. I can remember once I really, 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 I mean, this is a long time ago, wanted this job at a dating agency on Regent Street in London. And because I saw the advert for it one Valentine's Day, I thought, oh, that's a sign that job is mine. And I can't actually remember the name of the company, but I had 3 interviews. And for each interview, I designed myself and went out and bought a new outfit. But it was from the charity shops. And then I got this job. And it was a kind of company from across the States, run by someone who looked like Cyndi Lauper, who drank weird coloured pond water, but she called it juice. I mean, in those days, it wasn't quite, green wasn't quite the colour to drink. It was more like strawberry milkshake or banana or something. It was the worst job of my entire life. And I got sacked.
Of course you did.
Because she formed this contract with this radio agent for radio commercials, and she wanted me to break it. And I'd done law, I'd studied that. And even the basic person goes, I can't get out. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not like someone on the telly who, rump all of the Bailey. And she said, well, you have to break it because we're not going to go ahead. And they would get men in. And they said they'd match them personally with these cards. And when they found someone, the consultant would actually get in the cab if they said, oh, I haven't got my checkbook, I'll come home with you to get the checkbook. It was all about sales. It was just dreadful. And I remember the day I got sacked, she was in the boardroom, and she did, she was very blonde, and she's a bit Pamela Anderson, but kind of more so. And she said, come in. Shut the door. Now, the thing is, what I've learned from now on, if anyone says that, the answer is no. I'm keeping it open. And then what's really weird is Jeremy, my fictitious partner, husband, he was working in the same building, but on the 5th floor. You couldn't make it up. And so she sacked me. I think I was there for maybe 5 weeks or something. But that's just saying, I knew that in really, 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 I think I just wanted to get it. And you know, and because it was in the States and the time, I mean, I jumped through so many ropes and hoops in that short period of time, but it taught me, and I'm much better now. As much as you want something, just listen to your voice, because that is the voice of your mum, your grandmother, your great grandmother, your great who have lived. You know, my grandmother was a little Polish babcha who came over when I was born, and this little old lady with a scarf on, who lived in it's called a chalupa, which is like a little shack. There was no, you know, old age pensioners sort of care home about it. And she'd make her own soup and do whatever till she left, but she lived as part of a community, so that's the difference.
Yeah.
And she's also in there, and she's going, what? She didn't even know what a dating agency was, and I didn't listen to her. So I think intuition is a wonderful thing. And I know we're not talking about business, but I think all brands, you know, need to have a head, a heart and guts. And so it's rational, emotional and intuitive part of their brand. And it's the intuitive thing that drives people to you, whether you're a person. I intuitively don't like people.
Well, that's something to say on a podcast. I intuitively don't like people. Right. All right, Hela.
As much as I intuitively really like people, and when I like them, it's almost like it doesn't matter if it's a week, a day, a year, 20 years, 40 years, you know, it's kind of like I've got this sort of magnet that repels or attracts. You know, I know.
Oh, golly. Well, you know, I think you moved to Scotland before I met you.
Yes, that is correct.
So you were only in Scotland for a few weeks, I think, before I met you.
Not long at all. Not long at all.
And since you've been in Scotland, you've done foraging.
Yes.
You've been places that, you know, you never thought you'd go. You've explored castles. I know. You want a castle, don't you?
I do.
See, I know. But you know, they are very cold and drafty.
I know.
Require a lot of work.
They do.
Yeah.
It might just be a figment, but maybe I'm just gonna make friends with someone who's got a castle.
There you go. I think you already know people.
Yeah.
And you know, there's all this kind of stuff that goes on, and every single time we get together in groups or anything, I find that your creative juices are just kind of on overdrive. And there's not a time I haven't seen you working in a group where you come up with a line, you come up with an idea, you come up with something, and people are like, oh my gosh, where'd that come from? Yeah. And I'm not really sure where it comes from with you, but frankly, I'm enjoying Hela.
Excellent. Well, I'm very pleased to hear it. That's all I can say.
Even if you don't like people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Don't tell anyone.
No, I won't.
No. Shh.
Yeah, it'll be our secret.
Have you heard she's called the Connectress, but she doesn't like people?
She doesn't like people.
But I will say, I think from the first time we spoke, it was like old home week.
Yeah, truly.
And we got on like a house on fire. But now, Joanne, we're going to talk about intuition, because I know that you and I both use intuition a great deal, and we have been exploring intuition for years. And I think that Hela mentioned the way she uses it with creativity and with, to some degree, her identity. Tell me about your experience of intuition and how it filters in through your life.
I think the main thing that's come to mind as I've listened to both of you so far is how important intuition has been to almost force me to let go of stuff that I did want too much. And find out that, as my grandfather always said, everything happens for the best in the long run. It's easy to get attached, and part of my use of intuition is to allow myself to be neutral. That was another word that came to mind while I was listening to you, Hela, and how excited you were about your job and then having it all blow up in your face. It happens to all of us. Things blow up in our faces. And I found the most peacefulness from being able to listen to that intuition, know it's a friend, and even though I've tried very hard to do something that I thought I wanted to do, just let go.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can listen better or feel better, because it's not always just a listening for words in one's head. A lot of people get their intuition from how does it feel in their gut, right, Hela? And some of that anxiety that we feel when we're getting an intuitive hit is actually not a no. So it's really important for me anyway to be open and let things settle first. Make sure I haven't got something from when I was age 4 that's keeping me from getting where I want to go because I'm afraid of something. But just be neutral and open to almost anything that might come through. I think a lot of times we do too much filtering and we don't consider certain things right off the bat, and then we miss out on an opportunity that may not have seemed right for us, but then turns out to be. So there's a lot of just listening and patience and trying to be neutral about the situation so I can really hear clearly. And I usually just go into this listening place that I can do in a couple minutes, and then I can get a pretty good idea, but it just depends on the situation.
Right. Well, I'm going to add a few words to all of this, and one of those is expectation. Because a lot of times our expectations can get in the way of discerning our intuition.
Oh, yeah.
And the other word I'm going to put here is censorship, because it is very easy to think we're being discerning when we're simply censoring something out of fear. And really, intuition requires courage. And it requires courage to take a risk, and it requires courage to say no. And a lot of times I find that people tend to deny or avoid that in order to stay in their comfort zone. And they're not really paying attention to what their intuition is trying to help them discover. I know that because of talking to so many people, like I have over however many years I've been having conversations. And I know that because of my own personal experience. You know, hindsight is 20/20, and the older you get, the more you have to work with. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. But the older you get, the more you have to work with. And part of that is saying, oh my gosh, did I really do that? And oh my gosh, I didn't do that. And maybe I should have. And what happened? And who was I then? And, you know, what kept me from it? And a lot of times that's tied to our identity, that's tied to our self-worth, that's tied to our confidence and our courage and our willingness to give ourselves permission to really embrace whatever identity we need to make things happen. You know, I think there's a saying that says 20 seconds of courage can change your life.
Truly.
Oh, wow.
And really that's all that's asked for, is you have an intuitive hit that you decide, I'm not going to censor this. I'm not going to put expectations on this. I don't need to attach myself to any outcome. I just need to embrace it. So I'm going to have 20 seconds of courage, and I'm going to do it. And see where it goes. You can always employ another 20 seconds of courage and say no.
Yeah. It's so true. And linked to that, if you remember Shrek, when there's Donkey going, pick me, pick me,
Yes.
pick me.
Yeah.
And sometimes
I've been that donkey before,
I've
Helen,
been
just so
that
you know.
donkey, I'm just telling you. And I did actually, again, I used to sort of say to Theo, put your hand up. No, that's putting your hand up.
No,
You know, otherwise you're not going to get picked with this.
No.
That's not really, oh, maybe I might, if you're going to say something, hand straight up,
Yep.
and then something will happen. And it just reminded me of a time when, I could have not, because sometimes I didn't really like speaking in public. And I went to this event called My Favorite Dress that was at the Fashion and Textile Museum. And it was the opening of an exhibition of Sandra Rose had created this museum. And her curator had gone round all the fashion designers and asked them to send their favorite dress. And out of, say, 100, maybe 70 did. And you had to arrive wearing your favorite dress. And Annie couldn't make it. She'd kind of booked it. I said, oh, yeah, I'll go. And so I went. And it was great. And I was a little bit, Sandra Rhodes, oh, my God.
Starstruck, is that it?
I was. There was this amazing pink-haired fashion icon who'd designed for Lady Di and all these various punk stars, and she was something. I liked her. I kind of wanted to step into her shoes for a day. And then I, when they were talking and asking questions, I'm like, ask a question, go on. And so, because I did this, and it was like, yes, what? And I said, do you know what would be amazing is if we had a My Favorite Dress Day annually. And she said, oh, why don't you come and see me tomorrow and we can talk about it?
Hey, there you go.
And the day after. But anyway, so when I got in the next day, I was like, Annie, you'll never guess what. We're going to have a meeting with Sandra Rose. And she's like, OMG. And we ended up doing the My Favorite Dress ball at the Hurlingham Club.
Oh, wow.
18 months later. But, we were there. We'd have meetings with her and, we also had events at her penthouse. We met Larry Hagman at a cocktail party she had. Theo saw her bedroom. That's all pink. We went downstairs. I mean, talk about creativity. It was like Indiana and the Temple of Doom with boxes of all her creations. And she's still and she's born, well, not born, her birthday is the day after mine. So if I hadn't have done that and been courageous, I wouldn't have been able to tell you this story.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yay.
And that links us all quite quickly to memory, because sometimes stories mean something as long as you keep them in the context of what you're discussing. Stories can be throwaway too. So some people will tell a story for the sake of telling a story. It has no context to what you're doing. And other people are really good at having a bank of stories, whether it's from their past or a story they share with someone else. They will have a bank of stories they can share in context with what's being discussed, and it will create a shift, right? Now, not that you did any name dropping, Hela, and
not at all.
No.
Not one bit.
No, and not that the story that you just told wasn't contextual, because it was. It brought us to memory. It brought us. It tied us together from identity and creativity and intuition, and brought us right to memory. So I know you've got a ton of stories. Now, I don't know how many of them are real and how many are made up. But I'm just saying, some people, they're really good at making up stories that are kind of real.
Mine are real.
So, see, there you go.
Definitely, they're all real, and I hadn't thought of that for such a long time that I thought I wrote down, must invite Zandra to Diamond Dames.
See, there you go. There you go. But Joanne, because you write, there are stories that you draw upon to write. Because everything that you write comes from somewhere, doesn't it?
Yes.
Right. So a lot of what you write will have some context and meaning to stories from your past. And this is the thing about stories, is that they're from the past. And stories typically aren't really what happened. They're what we remember happened. And
Right.
that can be skewed a bit as time goes forward,
Right.
because our memories are not very accurate, really. So I always say my stories are made up because I know my memory is flawed, and because I actually have a something I have told myself, that I am not committed to remembering anything that is not important. If I don't think it's important, I'm going to forget it. I've told myself that. I intend to do that. I don't have enough space up here for every little thing. I would very much like to only keep those things that I deem important at the time. And don't ask me dates, and don't ask me things like that. I'd be a terrible witness. Let me just put it that way. I'm putting that out there. I'm a terrible
good
witness.
to know. Good to know, though.
Yeah. See,
Heads up.
yeah. But Joanne, I'd really like to know the way that your stories shape what you write about.
Okay, so I'm feeling it backwards. My stories shape what I write about, but what I'm writing about is what becomes my stories.
Well, that's that
So what are you
circular
looking at?
economy,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Okay, right. From a story perspective, I guess I'm pretty much of a mythologist, which was something that I've been since I was about 10.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
started reading Greek mythology. So I always see these big patterns in human behavior and human collections and everything. And that's what I want to take an angle on, make more of, make something relevant, like we've just seen the Odyssey has been turned into a movie
Yeah.
again. Make that, help people understand these themes, these things in the collective that recur over and over and over again, that show us ourselves in the larger sense of our whole selves, and the kinds of, for the Odyssey, for instance, the kinds of decisions that you end up having to make because of what's presented to you in the world. And that's one of the reasons I probably one of the reasons I read tarot cards, is because they are all archetypal bits and pieces that give me some of my intuitive messages. For instance, if I'm going to ask for an answer from the universe, I can use them as well as my own inner self. And I want to keep writing about this mythology, and I'm going to do more and more of it. I've changed the name of my Substack so that I can take there's stuff that's real, that science has found out about, and there's the whole community in our heads. Doesn't matter what part of the world you're from. They've all got their own story.
They do. They do. And I think what you're actually doing is creating a more contemporary, contextual mythology around all
Right.
of that.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Couldn't find the words.
But we need to kind of have a contemporary look at the time, because we're running quite late now, and it might be a good time to say thank you to Hela for being here.
Yes.
I know we could be on for hours, ladies.
Yes,
That's true.
It's true.
Yeah. Because between us, there would be so many stories and so much to share. And I think we could be on for hours, and I would love every minute of it. And if you're our listener or our viewer, we appreciate you being here. We thank you very much for taking the time to listen and watch. And I hope you will look to see more about Hela, more about Joanne, more about myself and Jillian. She wasn't here tonight. And go ahead and connect with us. We can be found pretty much everywhere, except me. I'm only on LinkedIn. I'm not on socials. I'm just on LinkedIn social, but that's the only
Yeah.
one I'm on. But please do reach out if you care to connect with us. Leave a comment on YouTube. I don't think you can do that very well on podcasts. I don't know. But please do reach out if you care to. And be with us next week. We're going to be back with Jillian next week. And hope to have another guest very soon. And who knows, Hela might join us again in the future.
You just never know.
You never know.
Because
She might.
I love the idea, by the way, Greek mythology, isn't that? I love mythology. I love the gods. I love their names. I love the bad ones and the good ones, but particularly the bad ones. They're my favourites. Those that are
Yeah.
up to no good, there really is something to learn from them.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed
There's
they
more
are.
fun.
And can I just say,
Certainly.
not that's not the gods, but yeah, it is. Do you know Hela, goddess of death?
Yes.
Who she is?
I know who that is.
Then
Yes.
I need to say no more.
I'm not saying anything about that.
Kate Blanchett modelled it on me. She,
Oh, of course she did.
yeah,
Of course you did.
yeah.
Yes.
There we
There's
go.
no one other to model it on, is there?
Only me.
Let's see.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
yeah,
saying.
in that dark suit. So thanks,
Uh-huh.
Kate, for modelling
Modeling
Hela,
that.
goddess of death, on the actual real Hela, which
Uh-huh.
is Hela from Bradford.
Right. Got it.
That's right.
Well, thank you very much for being here, Hela
Thank
from
you.
Bradford.
Yes.
That's right.
And I certainly hope you will join us again in the future. Thank you all so much for being here, our listeners, our viewers. Joanne, thanks for being here. And we will see you again